Shakespeare?
Shakespeare? Sure.
Didn't you you said you watched Shakespeare yesterday? A play.
Midsummer Night's Dream, just down there, about a minute's walk. And we were hoping we would have the beloved, remembered, huge castle set up where you go inside this, like, plywood, spray painted built castle, and there's a theater inside. They, like, would throw up in Cedar Grove every summer and then tear down again. But it was just like no set, no structure, just practically nothing. Like the loosest setup of an arch and some steps and stuff that they could literally screwdriver the nails out again and tear the whole thing down as soon as the play was over. And most of the actors were bad. And a lot of the costuming was pretty bad. The music was great, mostly. And it was a blast, yeah. I don't think I've seen Midsummer Night's Dream in living memory. If I've sat through that play, the last time I watched it was when I was 5 or 7 or 8.
Wow, you were a cultured child.
And my older sister was an actress.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Was deep in the Shakespeare. So there was a lot of reciting of lines around the house growing up. And when I had no escape when I couldn't escape, I would be helping her with her lines. But I did succeed to still be pretty ignorant of Shakespeare most of my life.
I feel like I'm still ignorant of Shakespeare.
And
what is it about Shakespeare that people? I read this take that it was just because Shakespeare's reason why Shakespeare is great is that his works have just influenced the English language so much that in the same way that the King James Bible has influenced the English language so much. So at this point, when you read Shakespeare or you read the King James Bible, it seems very lucid, but that's because the language is built using so many of those metaphors that there's this...
Yeah, the culture you're living in is built on what...
Exactly. You're living in Shakespeare's world, so of course it makes sense. Whereas if you were to discover a trove of a contemporary of Shakespeare's that was, most critics would agree is just better at showing the whole range of human emotions and characters and blah, blah, it still wouldn't have the same impact because there's not phrases like to be or not to be, that's something that most people probably don't realize. Well, most people probably do realize that it comes from Shakespeare, but there's a lot of things that probably, even if it's just themes and stuff, like Romeo and Juliet, how much has that theme found its way into things that don't even necessarily know they're being influenced by Romeo and Juliet?
Sure. Yeah, there's a heavy amount of that going on, and why we love Shakespeare is he built us culturally.
Well, it's funny, even the phonetic alphabet, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, that whole way of saying letters on the radio, so you can't, just the idea is to get rid of ambiguity.
Yeah.
So it's not the bomber pilot, oh, I thought you said E. You mean D? Oh, whoops. Drops the bomb in the wrong place. That kind of thing. The letter J and the letter R are Juliet and Romeo, respectively. So I was like, oh, the Army's so cultured. They included a literary reference. Beautiful of them.
There's hope for our Army yet.
I love the phonetic alphabet because it is this really funny little cross-section of it is like if you skimmed the creme de la creme off the top of culture, or if someone who had no idea what they're doing and didn't care did that and just like, look, we're just looking for words that everyone knows, ma'am.
Yeah.
We don't really care where they come from.
Yeah.
Do you know what alpha is? I hope you know what alpha. Bravo. Good. No one knows what fucking beta is. Bravo. That's what we understand.
Yeah.
Charlie. That's a pretty common name, right? So like they fall back to Greek whenever they don't have any ideas.
Yeah.
But like all the other non-Greek ones are like really cool.
Fall back to the last time an idea happened.
Well, right. So now the phonetic alphabet is this like, it's this little snapshot of like the 1940s parlance.
Sure.
Like foxtrot. The fuck is foxtrot?
Yeah.
A fox? Is that something people used to say? I don't know. And so for that reason, you always have to read it in mid-Atlantic accent. Like,
give it to me.
Well, it's perfectly understandable. I mean, you just speak like this. No one can, like that kind of like it's 6 o'clock and tuning in from KNCB5 in Los Angeles. That kind of accent. I love that somehow. When I hear that accent, it just gives me this
comforting
feeling. And I just wish, I feel like if all news broadcasters went back to that accent, all politics would be solved.
Felt like there was a little more order in the world for a second.
Less ambiguity. But just tell me what's happening. I gotta get back to work.
Just tell me what you see, Charlie.
Yeah. Exactly. There's just no bullshit, there's no room for nuance and smushiness.
You could really feel the difference when an actor was giving you the words straight or giving you the straight scoop on their lines, and when they didn't quite understand what they were saying.
Oh, in Shakespeare?
And were just
when they were just phonetically stumbling through the...
just kind of spewing out these things that they memorized, and they know it goes with the happy mask of the two masks of drama. As usually happens, the comedic relief were the best performers. There's a whole troupe of fools in Midsummer Night's Dream called the Mechanicals that are busy making a play within the play, and then at the end of the play they perform their play for the other characters in the larger play.
Playception?
Yeah, it's plays within plays.
When you you resign from your theater troupe only to find that you're in a larger theater troupe.
No!
And you forgot
That's life. Life is a play. I think Shakespeare is the thing about it. Why is he great or something? I don't know if he's great or not. Jury's still out as far as I'm concerned. I don't know enough. I don't have enough information. It's like me with Akira Kurosawa films too. I've had good times with those films. I know he's this 50s Japanese filmmaker that's supposed to be one of the best filmmakers of all time. But some of his movies are boring as fuck.
Yeah.
And some of them are good, but I'm definitely peering through this dirty lens of history the whole time.
You've used that phrase before. I like that expression.
Yeah. And so with Shakespeare, it's a pretty muddy lens, because when you're trying to see what's going on, because what are you you're either reading the script just in front of you on a page, and so then you're missing 70% of the piece by reading it instead of being inside of the experience of it. And then even if you get to a Shakespearean play, who knows if any of those actors are worth their snuff, and you can the layman can go away from a performance being like, I guess I just don't get Shakespeare. And that's not true. You just had a bad performance. You can see it in the bad actors and the good actors. Like
the ugly actors.
The good actors, you know it's a good actor when you can understand what they're saying. And you can understand, like...
Yeah, get the fuck out of here, Mimes. Everyone hates Mimes. How do you feel about Mimes, Alex? I feel like I trust that you might have a more fair assessment of Mimes because you're not reflexively hostile to art, as most people are, and as I sometimes am.
Mime is an intensely exacting and amazing art form.
Yeah,
and
I think so too.
I'm kind of convinced that mime is an essential of performance, of theater performance.
So where does mime hate come from?
No one like understanding the application of mime training. Like mime training is about like, okay, we don't need a set. We don't even need the super slapdash set that we saw last night. Like a mime can just stand right there 20 feet in front of us and put the set in our imagination.
Yeah.
And put like objects and creatures of very high resolution just into our minds.
Pretty amazing.
That's what mime can do.
Yeah.
And it's mime is banking on the thousands of years of evolution and physical cues you get from people, and just capitalizing on that. Like, what can a gesture do? What can a facial expression do? How much can a facial expression communicate? How much can a facial expression communicate at 10 feet? How much can a facial expression communicate at 30 feet?
Yeah. Interesting. I bet if you're for deaf people, mimes are probably the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And they probably have like a greater appreciation of mimes because it's like, oh, this is what like acting is to me, except now you're doing it really fucking good because you're not even using words as a crutch. You're...
That's like what Jim Carrey said about building his career.
Oh, wow.
So he decided at some point in his early stand-up arc that he needed to make physical comedy because then people of any language could enjoy his performance.
He was right. I feel like at some point Jim Carrey got to a point where his primary way of talking was with facial expressions. I've seen him like on Conan O'Brien before, like on an old clip, where like he walks out and he does like the classic little like sitcom entrance thing, but he like manages to walk out and for like the first 10 or 15 seconds just kind of like maybe have like a few little like grunts or something, but really it's just his face going like and like having this little conversation with Conan just with his eyes and with his mouth and doing that like classic Jim Carrey, like that kind of like or I can do it, but like where he's like that open mouth thing he does, it's like trademark. I bet it's like probably like copyrighted by Disney or something. That facial expression. But you know what I mean? I don't know. Jim Carrey, he's a weird dude now. That dude's on a trip now. He's on his own thing.
Slipped, man.
But yeah,
that's disappointing.
He's a great though.
Yes, he's like up there, really up there, but get it together, man.
You know, that reminds me of something I wanted to say about the definition of a great. I think that a good definition of a great... Thanks, helicopter. Hold on here. I'm going to wait for this to pass because I don't want to... All right, whatever. I think a great is like... It's not whether you're good or bad. It's like you're great if people can't ignore you. If you can't be ignored, then... Which is another way of saying that the landscape of the art, it doesn't really... you can't really explain it without reference to something you've done. Which, you know, fame or infamy, both of those things count.
So your definition makes Donald Trump a great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But great, in my mind, does imply goodness as well. The word itself can include infamy the way you're saying, but it has to be stretched a little to include that.
That's a good point.
It naturally leans towards, this is a great person, partially because of the goodness they've made.
That's a good point, because by my original definition, you could say that like Hitler was a great, and people probably wouldn't say Hitler was a great. Hitler was definitely, you can't ignore Hitler. But
you could say, with my qualification of your thing, you could say he's potentially great. He had great potential.
Yeah. Or if
Am I canceled now?
Or depending, no, dude. Hitler was on the cover of, he was the Man of the Year, Time magazine, 1939, I think it was.
And was that by virtue of like rescuing Germany?
Yeah, he was
rescuing the economy or something.
Yeah, he dealt with, had really popular domestic politics. I mean, well, obviously he did. He was obviously popular. Yeah, so maybe a great is like, well, okay, so it depends on the lens that you're looking at history from. Obviously, if you think Hitler's a good guy, then you're going to be like, of course Hitler was a great. But just aside from that thing, I think, with reference to this idea of goodness, maybe there's some aspect of redemption where like becoming so important and so powerful in a field, in an art, in politics, or whatever, comes with almost like this invitation to become a bad guy. Oh, dude, there's a fucking deer over there.
Oh, that's a big one.
You want to look at this deer for a second?
Sure.
Get the deer in the shot. I don't feel like the audience needs to see this deer. There's the deer. Stalking across the path.
And we gotta...
There it is.
It's so beautiful.
Alright, I hope people are watching the video version of this. Okay, we're good. Beautiful. I'm gonna take a shot back here. Okay. Anyways.
Well, Shakespeare's a great.
Yeah.
And so he opens up one trait of the word, the cultural term for me of, are you generating not just pieces of culture or inventions or something, but are you generating like things that generate culture?
Year round 2. Okay, sorry. It's the same as the last year.
Just smaller.
Okay, so...
Like my text about the hyper image.
Yeah.
There's images and they can be profound and have great specific meanings, but then a hyper image has no specific meaning, is this Jungian archetype, and it's a hyper image because it generates unique images, or a hyper meaning generates diverse specific meanings, but in itself might be mistaken as meaningless.
I almost prefer, if I understand what the concept you're describing, I almost prefer the term meta-image or meta-meaning or abstract meaning.
See, that divorces it from reality and makes it this like thing up in the clouds. When I'm using my word, I'm at least liking it more than meta or abstract because it's inside the fabric of reality. Making the surface of reality fertile and send up specific things.
Okay, so a hyper meaning is something like you sent this text in response to that Alan Watts lecture that I texted you about sense of nonsense, and you said that you understood the argument, but you fundamentally disagreed with the conclusion, but that you offered the caveat that perhaps he's pointing at hyper meanings.
And the angels singing Alleluia, and basically going, whoopee,
Yeah.
And so it's a meaningless statement of playfulness and joy.
Yeah.
And he's saying that's nonsense, but that's like where the greatest meaning is found. I'm saying, no, that's a hyper meaning. The angels are enunciating a hyper meaning, and the enunciation of Alleluia makes it possible for us to say specific meanings like Shakespeare.
So it's a very hyper in the sense that it includes the potential.
It potentiates new sons and daughter meanings that are completely distinct and sovereign from that thing, but were like made possible by that like more core wordless exclamation. So I think Shakespeare is a great because he's the cultural object that makes it possible to make cultural objects.
Well, we talked about this before. Like we talked about Joe Rogan before. Like his podcast accidentally created a whole genre of podcasts that were just like in a similar vein.
And that's definitely a sense of nonsense going on there.
No shit. Yeah.
That's just
100%.
That's
but
stoned, drunk, fucking.
But really
saying
though,
whatever.
But really though, or like you could say like Dali is a perfect example of someone who created a kind of, well, what exactly did he do? Okay, he created paintings, photography, but he also created the possibility for other people to do that kind of work who needed someone to be the icebreaker.
Sure.
And just crash into reality and the boundary of culture and create a space where people can... So maybe that's what being a great is. It's the ability to create the potential for people to follow you. See, that would work with the whole Hitler thing, because Hitler, there was this question when Hitler was, they didn't know Hitler was a bad guy yet, 1939. They're like, Hitler's the man of the year. He's, so he had the potential to be great. But then he did something that made it impossible for people to follow Hitler. You can't even name your kid Hitler anymore. I think it's like illegal in Germany or something.
Yeah.
That's how bad Hitler fucked up.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the difference between if you're like infamous or something like that, and you don't have any redemption, there's no redemption arc that's built into your greatness, then the greatness doesn't last, and therefore people don't call it great. Because there's been infamous characters. Infamy doesn't necessarily preclude greatness, because I think after, Alexander the Great, perfect example, in his own time, people probably thought he was, people probably had some things to say about his, like the dude like sacked cities and genocided people.
It's way easier for us to look at a context and say, there's
3,000 years ago.
There's a lot of greatness to that guy.
Like,
he did good, actually.
We literally still have like cities named after this guy like millennia later.
Yeah,
so
now that I'm just enjoying the benefits of him and none of the brutality.
Exactly. Like time truly heals all wounds.
Oh, so fucking... In some crazy sci-fi future, is he going to be Adolf the Great?
You know what?
And is that future going to be like completely founded on like the achievements they retroactively saw that Hitler achieved?
I feel like if you look in the future like 3,000 years from now, okay, so this is hard. I don't know. This is tough because we don't know how media is going to evolve. We don't know to what extent media is going to turn over and bury itself like it has in the past up until the present, from the past to the present. But if you could imagine like a future like 5,000 years from now or something where there's been a nuclear war and multiple generations of humans have been born and died in relative ignorance, and then civilization reattains a similar level of technological development, and we rediscover archives of what happened in World War II, I'm pretty sure you would look at it as just a war. And you would go, Hitler was a guy who killed a lot of people. Stalin was a guy who killed a lot of people. The Americans bombed the fuck out of people too. The Americans nuked Japan. That killed a lot of people. See, you'd have a much more, I think you would have more of the view that just like, and I'm not saying, you know, before I get accused of being a neo-Nazi, I'm just saying living in our time, probably like the people who lived in Alexander the Great's time, you have a visceral experience of evil, and you see the way that evil affects your society still. Like, we still have neo-Nazis. Yeah. I think if we didn't still have neo-Nazis, and Nazism wasn't still a thing, or like whatever form it is in now, it would be easier to have a more objective view of Hitler. But it's almost like now we can't afford to have an objective view of Hitler because we still have a subjective view of Hitler. Whereas we don't have a subjective view of Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
And, you know, back in the 1950s, people did not have an objective view of, like, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah. It was a very, like, raw emotional thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was in Japan, too, but in America, that's where you get, like, that, like, image of, like, the, you know, traumatized war vet at a bar just, like, drinking a beer, drowning his pain, and the Japs, you know, something that kind of thing. Yeah. So, like, but since then, there's been, quite a bit of healing between Japan and the United States, and Germany and the United States, for that matter. And so we've sort of binned the trauma of World War II into this kind of, like, history category.
We
hope it stays there.
I don't think there's any amount of time that can go by that can really erase Hitler's sin. I think he, like...
But it could erase the feeling of it. But and that's what's dangerous, actually.
He made the objectivity of his evil... He earned it.
Yeah.
He earned it. This is objectively evil.
Yeah.
We have the records. We have the evidence. He made sure the world knew what he was doing with the Holocaust and why he was doing it.
Which is kind of in spite of, actually, the efforts to destroy the evidence of it toward the end of the war, actually.
Right.
There was, but it's a bit of a futile effort there. I think though that, like, what's dangerous about, there's this tension between wanting to bury evil in the past, but also being wary of burying evil too deep in the memory hole, because then it has a way of becoming a zombie and coming back at you if you don't remember what it, like, you almost like you lose antibodies to that specific brand of evil.
It's really tricky though, because the present example is COVID.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that was objectively evil. A lot of shit that happened the last 2 or 3 years. I've never seen anything that clearly evil before. Publicly funded government campaigns to vaccinate kids that are 5 and under.
Yeah, they don't need it.
Is evil.
Yeah.
That's evil. And other things around that time were objectively evil. But the tricky thing about, like, making sure that gets remembered and that gets, like, clearly decided, like, okay, that's not okay to do that. There's this, like, there's this line of psychological health you have to, like, watch out for. Because when you're on the wrong side of it, you're just this traumatized person who can't fucking shut up about something that's over. Like, you're not moving on. Like, you need everyone to know how evil it was that we were trying to vaccinate super young kids.
Yeah.
And putting masks on kids in their most crucial developmental stages.
Right.
Like, if you're not careful, you're just... starting to be a drag at the party.
Yeah, and that's what I've felt from people I've interacted with.
But then, sorry.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bringing that up as one side and the other side is I have to say that every once in a while. That's the most evil thing I've ever seen in this world.
Exactly.
Like, I wasn't alive in World War II. I didn't see that.
Right.
I saw the Iraq War.
Right.
That was my first confrontation with evil. This is my second confrontation with evil.
Yeah.
And it's bigger than the Iraq War. And for my own sake of not letting things go too deep down into the memory hole and then like zombie up out of the gravestone, I have to out loud say that was objectively evil, and that's got to direct the rest of my life in some foundational way so that I am in a better position to meet it and act rightly the next time it happens.
Exactly. I've interacting with people since COVID was sort of all of a sudden, it seemed like everyone collectively just kind of stopped talking about it around March of this year or something.
Well, the Ukraine thing. Really
There it was. Yeah, there we go. It was a little way to slide into a new topic of hysteria. There was a new thing that so when there was that, whenever it was that people stopped talking about COVID, there is this weird sense now that's like, so we're just not gonna talk about just what just happened anymore. The whole 2 years, that whole thing, that whole fucking trip, we're just gonna move on, I guess. Like the amount of like things that people's lives, fucked up, businesses destroyed, mental health issues. Are we just not going to talk about that? People who died of COVID, for that matter.
The country's in free fall, complete economic free fall.
The fact that like that whole thing, it does seem pretty crazy that for 2 straight years you were not allowed to not talk about it, and now you're not really allowed to talk about it without, because like, oh, we're all so sick of it. It's like, okay, we are sick of it. So yeah, this I guess this just really speaks to this tension of like, whether this whole forgetting thing, it kind of, if you want to go back even further, the last, so sort of like Iraq War, but even a better example is 9/11. People had these hats, I remember the 9/11 Never Forget hats.
Yeah.
9/11 Never Forget. Okay, so I understand that. Yeah, 9/11 was fucked up. People died. It was tragic. You got to remember the people. Pearl Harbor, Never Forget. Same slogan. Mm-hmm. That's what 9/11 was compared to. So 9/11, Never Forget. Okay, so that's a way of collective grieving. It's a way of making this idea of, we're all in this together. But also, really, never forget. You're going to carry that with you your whole life. Mm-hmm. You're going to think about it every day. Mm-hmm. Do you need to? Because, you're not going to be alive forever. Maybe it's okay to forget. But is it? See? So I don't know. There's this weird tension, and maybe I wonder if that's what monuments are about. Like, it's important. Like, you can't ever. So, like, never forget. Don't forget evil. Don't let evil don't be completely just go into the ground completely, so that way it can sneak up on you again. But maybe there's a way of keeping these little totems or something of evil around in a way that's an artistic sort of way, where you don't have to deal with the uncontrolled, unconscious, visceral experience of evil to keep it in your life. Like, I'm thinking of they're actually, like, the Holocaust Museum in Berlin is a perfect example of this, where when you go there, it doesn't look like a big building. It's just this almost like little area where there's just all these gray concrete blocks that are like stacked end to end in rows, and they're like a little bit different heights and stuff. But what it represents is kind of like this, the way I interpret it is like it represents the way that people were not seen as individuals and were seen as just like these blocks of material. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of like the metaphysical basis on which the Holocaust proceeded. It was the dehumanization of the people who were the victims of it. So the concrete blocks they just look like concrete blocks. You're not going to look at them and like cringe or something like that. They're just like, what's all those concrete blocks about?
Yeah.
Oh, there's the reminder. So it's this little mnemonic device that when you go there, and then there's a little museum that's underground, that's underneath that. So it's this, and that, if you want to go underground, you can see the, photos of like atrocities. But maybe not everybody wants to spend every day looking at photos of atrocities, because life is beautiful and there's more to life than atrocities. So there's this, I think it's a really good example of how it's almost emblematic of the way Germany in general has dealt with their past. It's a really good example, I think.
Well, the museum is, but I don't think Germany is.
I think Germany
is...
Really? I think Germany's done a pretty good job. They might have overcorrected a little bit, but...
I think they're dead in the water, man. They have nowhere to go. They're completely nihilistic.
Well, it's not just... I mean, you might be speaking of Europe in general.
Well, I'm for them too, but the biggest tragedy of it is in that nexus in the middle there of Germany and neighboring countries, where all of Western greatness came out of that cradle there. And Germany I think is too far in the never forget thing, and they're not accepting that life is beautiful and doing what they need to do to excel and move into greatness.
I feel Germany has had a pretty rough time of the 1-2 punch of Nazism followed by communism, though. Like up until 1989, 1990, they weren't even a country. They were split in half. They're
like some of the greatest people in the world, though. Like, they could deal with it.
But if you have a living memory of, like, I don't know, it's crazy to think about how there's people in Germany who are 40 years old, who were like a 10-year-old when there was communism.
Yeah.
40? That's not very old.
Yeah.
That's like...
That's true.
That's like...
That's true.
I'm going to be 40 in like less than a decade.
It's still reeling.
Oh, it's still raw. It's still like, you probably still have this really strong memories of what, like, Angela Merkel grew up in East Germany. She has, I think that informs a lot of her. And yeah, she was a disappointment.
Yeah, she's an idiot.
Angela Merkel, I feel like, did a good job in the very beginning, but then she kind of ran out of ideas.
She's just a weather vane, just like every politician. That's not a good statement.
I'm kind of okay.
I shouldn't have said that.
Which part?
Like every politician. That's not a good thing to say. But in terms of forgetfulness and like still being in the raw experience, like I don't think anyone's forgetting or not talking about COVID. I think we're all just dealing with the world COVID created. Yeah. And that's called inflation threatening to become hyperinflation.
Well, that's the world that lockdowns and quantitative easing created. Let's not get confused here. The virus didn't create inflation.
The response.
It was the response.
The response to the virus inflamed inflation, which started with the end of the gold standard.
There's a website called WTF happened in 1971.com.
Cool.
It's worth taking a look at.
Cool, that's exciting.
And it's just a...
See, that's a very sticky URL.
Very much so. WTF happened in 1971.
And you immediately know as a crypto bro. As a crypto
I'll
bro.
I'll own it.
As a crypto bro, you immediately know by the URL what kind of value you're going to get out of the website.
So that's like... I think the year...
already
1971. 1971 is one of those years that is quickly becoming, at least in crypto circles, is becoming a year like 1984.
Well, I'm fucking glad, man. I am. Yeah. That gives me hope that we're all finally, like, never forget 9/11. Like, remember the evil that has occurred, I am glad that we're starting to know, getting rid of the gold standard is evil.
Well, what it is it's giving...
Or it has to be seen as evil if we're going to effectively move forward.
I think it's actually, it's one of the, I think it's better, it's more irresponsible than it is evil. Now, and irresponsible things create...
Well, it's generative.
Yes,
the argument is that total war completely depends on fiat currency.
Among other things, yeah.
So ending the gold standard is generative of the worst atrocities in human history.
So when fiat currency combined with a dysfunctional political system is a recipe for disaster.
No, fiat currency necessitates a dysfunctional political system.
I would say dysfunctional political system necessitates fiat currency.
Okay, yeah.
But once they both exist, they feed on each other.
You feel me though, like one is making both of those. I think I got which one wrong.
Yeah. Well, anyways, WTFhappening1971.com. It's just it's a HTML page, just a bunch of charts. It doesn't editorialize too much. It just is a bunch of charts that kind of show some very interesting correlations between, for example, GDP and real wages. GDP goes like this, a straight linear increase. Wages are matching the linear increase right up until 1971, at which point they go flatline. And they've been flatlining ever since. Because what fiat currency does is it lets people in power go, we gained some productivity. Let's just create capital out of thin air. When they're really not creating capital, they're creating the symbol of capital. They're diluting capital, and they're deciding where to put those gains. Mm-hmm. And surprise, surprise, it's not going to the working class. Yeah. So, hey, you'll find a lot of if people really understood what was going on, you would find a rare point of unity between people who pretend to be Marxists or actually are Marxists. They're pretty rare, but mostly, let's say people who are, working class politics, which is weirdly the Republican Party now in whatever universe we're living in. But that's what I'm saying. Labels are all fucked right now. People who work and think that work is good and that someone has to do work. Anyone who believes that.
I don't think that's been a Marxist for a very long time.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Everything's all squirrely. I almost feel like we need to do a large refresh on language and just sit down and be like, what the fuck are we even talking about?
Liberal means conservative. Yeah. Conservative means conservative or liberal.
But only in America. If you go to Canada, it's flipped. If you go to the UK, don't even get me started. What the fuck is a Tory? Yeah. I know, it's so fucked. I almost think it's by design. It's where you can just they're really just nominal tribal affiliations at this point. It could be called the planet Zorlax or something. Yes. It would have the same meaning.
The Zorlaxodons.
Yeah.
And the Fulats.
Yeah, or what is the H.G. Wells, the something or others, and the master race and the enslaved race, and H.G. Wells' dystopian sci-fi universe. That's kind of the extreme. Just projecting out these. That's what's so dangerous about tribalism, is that it doesn't feel the need to be in contact with reality. It's kind of its own reality, so it can spin off into the most wildly impractical dimensions.
The insanities of tribalism just depend on enslaving the people who are in touch with reality.
Or at least getting them out of the way.
No, because once you get them out of the way, there's no one making your food.
There's no one to do the work. Yeah. Yeah, I think shit's gonna come to it's going to come to a head when machines are able to do everything, and that the working class isn't even necessary anymore. I think if humans haven't sorted their political problems at that point,
I think the working class work is always necessary.
Not if we have AI that does everything.
You have to be valuable to your fellow humans, or you wilt and die.
But if there's a small group of bureaucrats deciding what constitutes value to other humans, and like we have now, like looking at COVID, there was a small group of bureaucrats that decided for hundreds of millions of people that, human interaction, that doesn't really provide value. Seeing each other face to face is not important. That was something that the government decided for everyone.
That didn't change the reality that that's valuable, though. Everyone just got together behind closed doors.
Some people did. Maybe some other people learned the value of it. I like to think a lot of people did.
I think I probably did.
Yeah. I know.
It's literally hard to remember.
It is kind of hard to remember.
Partly because I don't want to think about it anymore.
I know. Yeah. Isn't that weird? This whole memory hole thing has such a double edge to it.
I said last night, though, to Jade, here's one clear thought about these 2 straight years of COVID is that's never happened before. Or specifically, culture has never stopped before. She was like, well, things stopped all the time. Like, if the Black Plague was spreading around, then all the plays got canceled. Now it's like, no, all the plays got canceled in that part of that continent. The rest of the world kept going. All of culture, the entire fucking world, stopped all at once.
Well,
That's never happened before.
It took the Black Plague,
Nothing even close to that has happened before.
I think a lot of that's to do with the amount of travel that people do now. Whereas, because the Black Plague, I think it took decades to tear through Europe. Because there was all these little villages that just we haven't had an out-of-towner in many years. And you show up and everyone dies. So it was this much more slow burn kind of plague. Whereas now it's just
this was immediate.
Yeah, this was all at once.
And it made this completely objective stopping point. The entire planet came to a point in the road and stopped together. And now we're going forward.
Okay, so this gives me an interesting thought. We're going forward. So in Japan, there's these stones that are created as memorials / warnings for tsunami waves. Because apparently there's little villages that are sitting in a cove, and every few hundred years a tsunami comes and just fucks the whole thing up. And so every time there's a tsunami, the survivors put a little stone, which is this little monument that goes, in the year such and such, this is the highest point that the tsunami reached. Mm-hmm. And that's all the information we have to go off of.
That's sick, though.
It's cool.
It's really smart.
Yeah, and so there's been instances when people have actually been saved by that because they're like, I'm going to decide to build my house uphill of that rock. Mm-hmm. And they didn't die. So thinking about this in terms of COVID, if this mass hysteria that overtook the world between March 2020 and, let's say,
March 2022.
Right, there you go. Good solid round 2 years of madness. So if that was a tsunami, what is the stone, how do we make a monument out of this? How do we create a monument that generations from now, people can see it and know?
Yeah, there's a tyrant's way to do it, punishment, that's how. And then there's a more generative, creative way to do it of making a monument or something.
I mean a monument against fear. A monument against the kind of hysteria. Let's say that in 10 years, right now, so have you seen monkeypox memes?
No.
Monkeypox is a thingy that's just I think it's just a way for the news to try to cash in on the last dying gasps of pandemic hysteria or something. Monkeypox is not a concern.
It's a new thing that...
It's like only contagious if you have sex with people or something, so it has like zero chance of becoming a pandemic. But there's a bunch of headlines that are trying to make you think it's a pandemic because it gets clicks. That's the entire story. So that is it's not, no one except aside from a few people really care about that at all, because we're just really, really done with this kind of messaging. And so like I imagine like right now if people announced like there's a new pandemic, there'd be an entire, probably like half the population would go, no there's not, even if there was.
Totally.
And they'd pick up their gun and be like, make me, bitch, you know, like we're not going back into this. Like there is a extreme resistance against that now, because we're just coming off of this bender. We've woken up, there's the hangover, and we're like, I'm never gonna drink again. It's that stage of cultural processing of what we just did. So, okay, however, let's say 15 years from now, 20 years from now, okay, so 2042. There's a new pandemic, COVID-99, you know, the Zeta variant or something is, okay, at that point, are we gonna go through it all over again? Or are we gonna remember some kind of, okay, assuming that, you know, it actually isn't the deadly virus, same story, let's imagine something is not too deadly, but there's vested interests who want to make a big deal about it, for whatever reason. How do we stop that from happening? Art is the obvious example. Like George Orwell's 1984. I guarantee you, if you look at the Google Trends line of George Orwell 1894, there is a big spike around March 2020. I should verify this, but I would be willing to put money on this, that those kind of like dystopian cultural references probably had a heyday in this time and probably did something to blunt its impact.
Very much so.
Very much so. I know it did for me. Like, I think if I wasn't already kind of a...
Well, what you're doing by seeing 1984, like you look, new crazy things happening, you look to this thing that's already been made from the past. It's the equivalent of looking over to your left and being like, are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure if this is the most insane, irrational thing of all time that's going to come to evil ends. But that's what it looks like. Is that what it looks like to you? And then George Orwell goes, yeah, that's what it looks like to me too. I don't know if it's true either, but I'm with you, dude.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, you build consensus based on things like that.
Yeah, like our pieces of art are like the monuments that last throughout generations, and they provide a kind of condensation nucleus for consensus.
But there's a artistic opportunity here in the way you're bringing it up right now to be more intentional and less artistic and more engineering minded about some kind of monolithic piece of art that just functions as one of the Germany memorial stones.
Yeah.
Or just functions as one of the tsunami stones.
Yeah.
So an art project would literally be to just like make a giant fucking sculpture.
Yeah. Or do
and
like
have a plaque going, this is what this means.
Crowdfund some kind of giant monument in the desert or something that's like so conspicuous that the next time it happens, you can point at a concrete thing and be like, remember the reason why we went to all this effort to do this apparently pointless pile of rocks is so that you'll remember, and you cannot ignore the fact that something happened. You can't just forget about it.
Okay, so are the pyramids doing that? Are they like attempting to tell some really important story about the past that everyone's completely forgotten?
I think so.
No one can read the plaque under it anymore that says, a fucking cosmic alien invasion tsunami happened on this day.
Yeah, I saw this on the History Channel. I remember my parents put that on for me because they wanted me to be educated. You know, I was watching Tom and Jerry, but they're like, son, you should probably Get educated if you're sitting in
Time
front of
for you to learn about ancient
aliens. Yeah. I'm like, okay. Yeah. I'm glad I had good parents.
I'm excited to have kids and curate their knowledge. Honestly.
Oh man, they're gonna be wild.
They're in the school of Alex Light, as far as I'm concerned. I remember my friend told me how his parents curated Star Wars to him growing up. And
Wow.
It was a magical thing to hear. They like planned and made their kids earn their first viewing of A New Hope, and then like set their viewing of Empire Strikes Back at some like future spot on the timeline that their kids had to like get to with good action.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, because now you have the opportunity to go all the way through episodes 1 through 6.
Oh, fuck that, no. I mean, you can do that with your kids if you
1
want.
through 6?
Fuck that.
You're not gonna do...
That's disgusting.
What?
Those aren't movies.
The first 3?
The prequels are not movies.
I think they're all right.
Yeah, they're all right to see once or twice in the movie theaters in the early 2000s. That's how all right they are.
All right, well, whatever.
I think they're unwatchable. Try watching them.
Star Wars, I don't care about Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
Star
You're just
Wars
completely detached.
I'm detached from... I don't really... I feel like Star Wars has become such a crusty... It's become such a crusty thing. You know what it's going to be? Star Wars is going to be like what old people talk about when we're fucking old.
Star Wars is culturally important and encrusted with all that shit the same way that Jesus Christ is religiously, spiritually important.
But Jesus isn't
and
crusty,
encrusted.
though.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Jesus isn't crusty.
When was the last time you went to church?
Like, a long time ago.
You don't go because it's not valuable, because it's all crusted over.
No, but because church isn't about Jesus.
That's how crusted over Jesus is.
Okay, I see your point. All right, I see your point. But I don't really, I don't know where you'd find Jesus, but it ain't church.
Well, I know where you find Star Wars, and it's not in those prequel movies. And the trilogy is one of the most important things that humans have achieved.
Okay.
Straight up.
Yeah, I won't dispute that.
Like, there's true, like fucking Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and shit, like, managed to get what they learned from looking back at all of history and abstracting crucial principles. They managed to get that artistically embedded into this sculpture called the Star Wars trilogy. And so now we like can remember things about integrating darkness and rescuing your father and stuff.
That's true. Rescuing your father.
Yeah.
God, I can't wait till postmodernism ends.
Is it over yet?
I hope so. I feel like it would be cool to have like new cultural objects to fixate on.
I want to be in modernism though.
You want to be in modernism?
And they already took modernism from whatever era was before postmodernism, and I feel like, no, I want to make what modernism era is called.
I'm kind of excited about pre-modernism coming back.
Yeah. Pre-modernism?
Yeah.
That's this. This is pre-modernism.
No, this is postmodernism.
This is postmodernism?
Yeah. I feel like we might be going back to pre-modernism in some ways. And it could be...
We're not going back to things.
Circling around.
It feels really new to me, though.
So the Middle Ages were pre-modern. There's an argument to be made that the classical Roman Empire was modern. That was kind of modernism.
Which empire? Say it again.
Rome. That Rome was a kind of ancient modernism. And when it collapsed... there was a period of postmodernism which precipitated the decline of Rome, but there was also a long period of reconciliation that we call, it's just the most recent example of pre-modernism we have. I mean, this is really loose, and like you could probably, whatever you could use pre-modernism as just like, if you're using it just to mean anything before the 20th, or let's say 17th, 18th, 19th century. That's just the latest, in my view, that's the latest iteration of, it makes sense to view it as the latest iteration of modernism and not, but modernism as a concept is more general, I think. It's like the idea of civilization and progress being unassailably, obviously good. That's kind of what characterizes modernism. And in the Middle Ages, that was the time of, spooky magic and quests and shit. And I feel like we're just gonna go back to spooky magic and quests because what is there to do? We're disillusioned with the idea that anyone knows what's going on.
I guess I'm deep already in the spooky magic and quests.
Well, you're part of the vanguard. That's the thing.
That's true. Yeah.
So
I'm hoping to reap big Bitcoin bucks off my pioneering work out here. Hopefully money will still exist by the time I bring this dragon's head back to culture.
It will. It'll just look different. It'll be more complicated and a lot more stable.
I bought $5 of Bitcoin this morning as a symbolic,
Nice.
Okay, I have to start paying attention now.
Yeah.
And my credit's good enough that I can stop thinking about that for a while. And in the meantime, I can let Dorsey's Cash App feed me little slivers of Bitcoin for my purchases.
Nice. Cash App.
It's basically the same thing as building my credit over on the other card. Oh, I just remembered, though, part of the point of that card is all the free airline miles I get.
Nice.
That's still really valuable.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that, okay. So I'm not building Bitcoin on the side like that yet, but it's pretty important, it seems. I agree with the ideological Bitcoin maximalists who just can't accept the possibility of any other thing. I agree that, it's at least a tighter standard than the gold standard. And I agree with people who say the gold standard is the best, so that means Bitcoin's the best.
Yeah, Bitcoin is just it has the most cultural cachet. It's the most unassailably real cultural object, and so it makes sense to, so it's a security mechanism. Is that, culture is not something that you can easily change. Even the Roman Empire, going back to just to tie it back to this, when the Roman Empire colonized Europe, they had a hell of a time rooting out the cultural elements of the various pagan civilizations that they encountered. And you could put a coat of paint or fresco, as it were, on top of that, the heathens on the northern boundaries of your empire, but they're going to start celebrating Christmas, but there's also going to be some weird shit with deer antlers, and there's going to be some weird little gods, deities that are living in the villages and mountains and caves that you just can't kill, no matter how hard you try. So I think that's kind of the original, every civilization is kind of a blockchain in and of itself. That's just a big cultural, it's this autonomous cultural evolutionary object that's just deciding what to keep and what to reject and what to bake into its future.
I think James Cameron's Avatar style, I think having parks like this is some trippy psychedelic best way of holding the memory, like the tsunami markers, making sure you remember, and making sure the generations past you once you're dead remember your crucial lessons. I think there's some trippy Mother Gaia thing happening where the trees can remember a lot of shit for the village.
What if the trees were listening to you and reporting back to the government or something?
The government? Why would a tree want to talk to Biden?
Because Saruman.
Well, those trees, they feel bad.
That's true.
You don't like sitting next to those trees.
I'd be okay if see, this is getting back into that spooky pre-modern shit that I'm talking about. I would be sort of okay if there was an evil wizard in the tower that ruled over a little area.
Okay, good,
as long
because
as
there is.
I know, but as long as it was a small area. See, what's great, see, the good thing about the antagonism in Lord of the Rings was the idea that, like, it wasn't, see, in Lord of the Rings, it's not like they're like, there's Mordor, that's evil, and so we have to do something about it. No, they're not going to do anything about it. They're enjoying their lives. It's only when Mordor tries to encroach and dominate the entire fucking world they're forced into action. You know, they're like, we didn't choose this, you know, that whole, I can't remember the little, you never know if it's like a Bible verse or something from Lord of the Rings. It's the same shit, basically, like, I literally don't know where this saying comes from, but the idea that, like, it is Lord of the Rings. It is only up to you to do with the time that you've been given, or something. You know what I'm talking about? Doesn't that sound like you would be like in like Proverbs or some shit? Like,
it's not our place to so and so, whatever. It's
literally Sam. He's like, we didn't choose this, Mr. Frodo, but I don't know how it goes. I don't even need to say it because everyone already knows the point of this is that, like,
we only have to choose what to do with the time given us.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
We don't choose what time we're living.
Yeah.
We just choose what to do with the time we're given.
Something like that. Something like that. Yeah. So. The fuck was I going with that?
The convenience of having the antagonist be like in a tower.
Yeah, so it was really convenient.
Proximity.
So it was like the antagonism came when the evil was spreading and it was trying to dominate and it was trying to bring the world out of balance, and it was just going to there would be no place left. Even the Shire would be burned, right? So yeah, I think I'm okay with there being, well, more like I accept the inevitability that there's going to be pockets of latent malignancy in the world, because that's what makes the world the world. And, you know, kind of Alan Watts' perspective, we sort of need those people in some sense. And to know who we are.
Ideally, we just only need them once. That's what you hope.
Well, but there's still some memory of them. There's some, like
it's important to have antagonism.
Yeah.
But there will come a point where we've learned enough where there will no longer be a need for malignancies.
I think there's always going to be a need to have potential for evil. You can't have protagonism without antagonism.
Yeah, but antagonism is like, that looks evil at the moment, and then it's just seen as practical later.
Sure.
And then, but like, it's evil that moment, but then it's like the next thing that happens after that also seems evil, but by learning from the last thing is like way, way more chill than the last evil thing that happened. Like, the ideal is like we learn from the Holocaust, and we ideally it'd be nice to learn from the horrors of communism too. And so that doesn't have to happen anymore. That doesn't mean that a new evil thing isn't gonna then happen and then like help us learn more in some crucial way about how to be humans, and that's super beautiful. But it'll be informed by like, it doesn't have to be as dark as that last thing happened. We never have to go that dark again.
It might feel that dark in comparison to what we're used to.
Yes.
But that's a sign of that, like, the human soul is growing and progressing and becoming better, which I think it is.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Everything else is. It would be real silly to assume that the human soul was static, because obviously at some point in the past it wasn't what it is now.
Well, the human soul's never fucking all stopped its entire planet of psyche at once before. So that's some like potential growth.
Yeah.
I brought that point up because it added to my little like my theory about things in these times and stuff.
The blinking awake thing.
The blinking awake thing of the mass human consciousness.
That COVID was a kind of the first time humans all collectively
one.
thought something. Yeah, that's true. What a weird point of unity. Fear. Of course it was fear.
Of course it was fear. That's how new senses come into being evolutionarily.
As soon as a baby's born, it goes, It's not happy. Don't worry, you'll be fine later, but welcome to the world, kid. You know? That's what human civilization is like. It's like,
so
okay.
a new phase of our consciousness blinked awake in panic.
Yeah. Of course we panic.
And then it can eventually wield its power in some intelligent way. Our power to all focus on something at once is potentially good and evidence that the soul of the whole thing is like gaining new powers.
Yeah.